Mark, you're live on Zoom. Give me a few
Cool.
minutes and I'll make you live on Facebook. Hang for me.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Brian. Ryan, do you have me spotlighted by any chance or no?
No, you're automatically spotlighted since you're the only speaker.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, 220 in the room. Let's see, we're gonna go live on Facebook in 1 second.
Hey, everybody, welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute, but why don't you just say hello and maybe where you're from. I love seeing where people are coming from. Now I can't keep up with it. All right, we got Long Island. We got Chicago, Miami Beach, South Carolina, La Florida, Bellingham, Washington, Portland, Oregon, Mexico, Atlanta, Central California, Lewiston. I know about my Lewiston folks. I got a little note about all of you. Welcome. San Francisco, Brisbane, Australia. Hey, that's cool. That's one of my favorite countries. Colorado, Coquitlam. Miss you guys up there. Hudson Valley, New York. Nice. Maine, Los Angeles, Vancouver. Very cool. Toronto, Georgia,
Thanks,
Texas.
Brian. I'm having a little trouble with the integration, but I'm gonna try to work it on the back end, but go ahead and get started and we'll figure it out.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Sure.
All right, well, welcome everybody. I'll stop looking at the chat box and look at all of you. Awesome, so nice to see people. I think we've got like every state here in the United States and people from other countries. This is just incredible. So welcome. Really excited to do this again. This is the second time that we're doing this Permission to Feel Book Club. Some of you may be joining for the second time. I'm sure for many of you, it's the first. And my hope is that this is going to be a really enjoyable experience for all of you. I benefited a lot from the first one. The first one launched just after many of us were in quarantine. And I really look forward to meeting with everybody on a weekly basis, just talking about your feelings. So we're going to be here for 7 weeks total. Tonight is week 1. And week 1 is going to just kind of get us through the prologue and chapter 1. And then every week we'll do about 2 chapters. And then in the third part of part 3 of the book, we'll go chapter by chapter. A few things that I wanted to share. One, I'm going to actually put up my slides for a minute now. And while I do that, just give me 1 sec. So you should all be able to see my slides. So today's day 1. We're going to focus on the prologue and chapter 1. You've all, I think, are at least listening or reading the book, so you know all about it. If you're going to do social media tonight to share some of your thoughts and feelings and actions about this work, there's my Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And we're going to post these on YouTube, on the website, and on Facebook afterwards if you want to share them with others. Or if you can't fall asleep at night, you can just listen to the Permission to Feel Book Club. So a couple of things. One, it's a good idea to do this with someone. There's a lot of really rich conversations that I hope you'll have both before and after this. If you went on and registered for the book club officially, you would have gotten a downloadable discussion sheet. You can take that and think through that with colleagues and friends. Not a big deal if you're doing it alone. I do most things alone, so I understand if you prefer that. You probably saw an email about the survey. So what's going to be different about this Permission to Feel Book Club than the last one is that this one is actually going to provide you with data about who you are and how you feel and your wellness. I just thought it would be super cool for the participants in this club to literally track their well-being across the 7 weeks. So I've never done that before. It's going to be new. I'm a little intimidated by doing this. It will be completely confidential. And so I want to encourage you, if you didn't take the survey before you logged in tonight, please take it after. And every week on Wednesday before the book club, I'm going to send you out that link to do the survey. And you can complete it. And then I'm literally going to analyze the data, keeping your everything confidential, and give you trajectories of your wellness across the 6 weeks. And what's going to be, I think, very good for all of us is that we're going to try to take all of this information and create an action plan from it. So, like, where am I? You know, how did I feel throughout the 7 weeks or so? And then kind of what do I want to do with my emotional life? So super excited. If you didn't do it, don't worry. It's just a survey. You can do it tonight. You can do it tomorrow. We will get that link to you. And the discussion guide is on the website. So you just, when you log in to become a member of the book club, it's just there to download. Okay. So I'm going to stop with the formal aspects of this book club now. Ask everyone to get a good seat, get comfortable in your seat. I already feel myself like this doing this book club. I'm like, Mark, come on. So can I ask everyone to just circle the next a little bit? I know someone said I sold myself. It's, you know, when you work at a university, there's so many rules about doing research. You know, we have to follow all these ethical guidelines. So I have to be super careful. But thank you for that. I think the survey is going to be really, really cool. All right, everybody. Nice, long inhale. A nice, long exhale. I've been looking at a quote recently that has resonated with me, and I want to start our book club with that quote. And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. And that is by Haruki Murakami. So take a nice long inhale and exhale. And now's the participation part. So can I get all of you to just think about how this quote resonates with you? What's coming up for you? What's coming up for you as a result of reading this quote? What does it make you think about? Strength, post-traumatic growth, a term that I really do enjoy. Perspective, grief, COVID, memories, graduate school, resilience, and grit. Perseverance, hope, change. We're going to get through this. Grief and loss, learning. Perspective, progress. Tearful. You know, I think for many of us, if not all of us, this has been, you know, as I shared a minute ago, it's been a roller coaster ride of emotions. Back when I did this in the late spring, you know, my goodness, it was right past shutdown, quarantine, distancing, masking. Nothing was, you know, no toilet paper, no paper towels. It looks like we're moving into this semi-new normal that I think hopefully will, you know, become even a better normal at some point very soon. But remember, this book is called Permission to Feel. We're going to dive deeply into that. And I wanted to say the first step of this journey, and I think this is especially true when you're filling out the survey work. You know, oftentimes when we talk about how we're feeling, what we do is we even lie to ourselves, right? We give ourselves a little bit higher in one word or a little bit lower in another word because we don't feel comfortable, right, being our authentic true selves. So I just want to encourage you, right, throughout this journey to be your authentic true feeling self. We're going to get into a lot of details about what is an emotion and what is a feeling, and we're going to dive deeply into our experiences and the emotions that our world is feeling right now, because we've done some pretty good research on that. But the first step, as all of you know, is giving yourself that permission to feel. So if you did that survey, I analyzed with the help of Michelle the data today. And so let's just see if you remember what you even wrote. You know, when you think of the term permission to feel, right, what comes up? What's the first kind of word? Not a whole, sentence or two, just one word to ask, to be unapologetic, safe, vulnerable, authentic, relaxed, liberating, goosebumps, honoring, accepting, validating the future, resistance. Let me ask you another quick question. As you think about all of these words, on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being, I don't really feel like I have the permission to be my true feeling self, to 10, I feel like I can be my true full feeling self. What would you give yourself? You got ranges from 1s to 10s. So a lot of variability here. If I were to ask you, would this vary by context? What would you say? So being able to be your true full feeling self at home versus your true authentic feeling self at work, would you give yourself a different number? Seeing a lot of absolutely yeses, 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 yeses. Almost everybody's saying yes to that. So what that brings up is context really matters. So let's see what the summary was. Obviously, I couldn't analyze the data during a webinar, but this is what all of you said. Compassionate, empathic, unconditional love, patient, validating, non-judgmental, supportive, attentive, accepting, encouraging, caring. Does this resonate with you? That when you give yourself and you give other people the permission to feel, that you are compassionate to yourself and to other people, you're comfortable being vulnerable, provide that unconditional love, empathic, non-judgmental, supportive, attentive, accepting, etc. I was thinking this could be just a survey, right? That we could give to our, before we go, when we're on a job interview, we can just hand the permission to feel survey to our future boss and say, would you mind completing this, please, about this workplace environment? What do you think about that? Or maybe when you're on a date, before you actually meet with someone on whatever website you're using or however you meet, you say, I'm going to ask you if you don't mind to fill out this little permission to feel survey before we get together. How do you feel? What do you think about that? You think I'm kidding? I'm not really kidding. I think this could be something. This could be the true emotion revolution, right? In our homes, in our schools, in our workplaces. So if you read the book, or at least read the prologue in chapter 1, you know that the term permission to feel is intentional. I got the term by listening actually to a teacher. The real story, which I told in my book, but I couldn't, I didn't flesh it all out, was I was at this training for schools here in Connecticut. And day 1 at lunch was waiting online, and I asked this principal, who was a pretty big, tough guy, and he looked at me and I said, hey, what do you think of the training? And he said, The lunch looks like it's going to be pretty good. And then I said, all right, to myself, like, he's going to be my project. Like, I'm going to get this guy on my bus. Long story short is that the end of the second day, it's 100 leaders, and superintendent, principals, district level officers. And I just looked at this guy and I said, hey, you know, yesterday didn't seem like this was going to be the right training for you. What do you think? And this man stood up and just looked around the room and just started crying. And he said, thank you for giving me permission to feel. And of course, I cried, the superintendent cried, and then I was like, it's a wrap. I got him on my bus. But, you know, one of the things that we're going to do on this permission to feel journey is we're going to go deep, and it may be uncomfortable, and it may evoke emotions that you're not wanting to be with in a particular moment. But I want to start off by saying, you know, if I had the magic dust and I could just like whoosh, throw it all at you, it would be this permission to feel dust, you know, that I would just automatically give you that permission. But it is a journey. It's life's journey. I wanted to share one other anecdote that's related to this that I had today. I was a kid who hated school. I was a C and D student in upper elementary and middle school. As you know from my book, I had terrible abuse in my childhood. I also was bullied horrifically in school. It's no wonder I was a terrible student. I was in survival mode, not learning mode. And I realized how unhappy I was and how I walked around with, you know, very slumped shoulders for a really long period of time. And you know, there were days when I felt good emotions, positive emotions. And I remember people saying things to me, something like, oh, what are you so happy about? What do you got to be happy about? And I didn't realize actually until this week during some meditation that I became phobic of expressing positive emotions because I anticipated that something would go wrong, or I didn't deserve, right, to feel pleasant emotions. And it was very eye-opening to that, you know, that I didn't feel like I had the permission to have pleasant emotions. And so guess what, everybody? Those days are gone. I'm working hard on this, and I want all of you to work on it too, because we deserve to have complete emotional lives. We deserve it. Our kids deserve it. Our partners deserve it. And so that's going to be our journey. And, you know, as you know from my story, when I disclosed my abuse as a child, things got actually worse for me. One thing I didn't share in my book that was a pretty bad thing was that I went on public television about my abuse at 11 years old. And what happened as a result of that is that I was on literally like the major station. I grew up in New Jersey, and it was the New York station's public television, evening television, Marc Brackett on the screen with a terrible psychiatrist who was exploiting me for the second time in my life to share my experience. I was a precocious kid. And, you know, they asked me, they were manipulative, and they said to my parents, do you think this is, you know, and I was like, I have to do this, you know, and I think it's important because of what happened to me. I'm 11 years old, remember? Anyhow, the psychiatrist convinced my parents that it was a good thing because he was writing a book on pedophilia. Anyhow, I go on television, and what happens? This is 1982. Everything gets worse because families start saying things like, don't let, you know, I don't want my kid hanging out with Mark. They're like, I already had a curse put on me. So I was blessed, though, that I had this man who was my mother's brother, who happened to be getting his graduate degree in New Jersey, where I was living, and would stay with us on the weekends. And we would sit in the backyard and have these unbelievable conversations about feelings. And he was the only adult that I ever felt I could be my authentic, true feeling self with, because he was just an unbelievable listener. And he was not like my parents were. My mom had terrible anxiety, so when I disclosed my abuse, she had a complete breakdown. My father got a bat and almost killed the person. Police came. It was a mess. And so they were preoccupied, with their own crazy feelings. But Uncle Marvin was different. Little did I know he would be my collaborator for the first decade of my life, because he was writing a curriculum to teach kids about their feelings in the 1960s and 1970s in upstate New York. And how lucky was I that I had this uncle who was doing some practicing in a healthy way with me, about this curriculum. He was learning to teach kids about history and feelings. And so in my research and other people's research, what I've learned is that a lot of people don't have an Uncle Marvin. Some people don't even think their parents are their Uncle Marvins. Mine weren't. And in school, I can tell you right now, in my particular situation, which was not a good one, I was just horrifically bullied. And I remember, I have a vivid memory of being bullied in school, and the teacher observed it and then moved his eyes away so he wouldn't connect with me and allowed me to get tormented by these kids. That memory is from 40 years ago. Hasn't gone away. And so I'm going to ask you right now, who was your Uncle Marvin? Did you have one? And if you did have one, what were their primary characteristics? What were their primary characteristics? And if you didn't have one, now that we're talking about all this, well, maybe you can even be the Uncle Marvin to yourself. Seeing lots of different really cool examples here. Uncles and aunts and parents and coaches and teachers. And so here is my task for you for week 1. We just started. Is 1, you got to be your own Uncle Marvin. And one thing I didn't share in my book, because it happened after my book was written, is that I went on this book tour, and I'm running around the United States. I literally think I did 50 talks in 2 months, running around different places. I end up in a training, or I'm doing a pitch for our school-based programming in upstate New York. And I'm just, when I used to do my emotional intelligence keynote presentations, I didn't talk a lot about permission to feel, because it was, when I hadn't written the book yet. I didn't talk a lot about my uncle, other than, the curriculum elements that we worked on together. But this book really brought out the story. And so I share my story in the most honest way I can, an authentic way. And I asked the same question to everyone else. And I said, who was your Uncle Marvin? Just take a moment. And all of a sudden, this gentleman stands up and he said, Mark, I just realized from everything you just shared about your uncle, that your uncle was my Uncle Marvin. And what I learned in that moment, that my uncle was this gentleman's middle school social studies teacher 45 years ago. And I was like, first I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And I said immediately, I'm like, you're not going anywhere. And I'm interviewing you at the end of this presentation, which I did do. And I share this with you because I was so freaking blown away by what this man remembered about my uncle. He remembered his beard. He remembered his eyes. He remembered the greeting that he gave children on the entrance to school. And then I started asking him things that I didn't share on my presentation. He said things like, what we would do, he would ask us about our experiences that we were having, and then he'd weave it into the curriculum. We'd go back to the experiences and then back to the curriculum. And it just blew my mind. And I can't tell you one of those experiences from my own education. And so here's my second request, that maybe you try this. And this is what it is. So I'm running around doing these presentations, and I'm asking people constantly about who's their Uncle Marvin. And then somebody who was really clever said something like this to me. They said, Mark, you know, I'm just curious. For whom are you an Uncle Marvin? And it really made me stop and like take a nice inhale and an exhale. And I realized, to be honest with you, that I'm a workaholic. I can barely walk my dogs. They're driving me out of my mind. We have Corona puppies in our house that are the cutest things in the whole world. But like, I got stuff to do. And maybe some of you can relate to that, because to be an Uncle Marvin for someone else means you got to stop and be with other. It means you got to pause and not think about yourself. I don't think we're trained in our world to do this. I think we're trained to go, 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 and not pause and be still and just take a moment and think about what other people need. And so my second request to you during our 7 weeks is, can you start to think about the person for whom you can be that Uncle Marvin or Aunt Marvina, whatever works for you. So I wanted to, because we're only here for 45 minutes and people sent in questions, and I want to answer some questions so we can really get this thing going. So the first question that came in from Dawn, I can't answer them all. Some of them I put into the future. I put them into the future because they're more relevant to other webinars that we're doing. So the first one is, how do we begin relaying to administrators and teachers the importance of this work beyond modeling it? Well, here's what I've learned over the years. And this, by the way, is for introducing this work to a school system. We have a company called OG Life Lab where we do work with companies. And I find it's the same exact thing. I was in a phone call today with a bank in New York City that has asked me to come in and do some presentations. And they're like, the group of us here really want it, but we are afraid that our CEO and the C-suite people are going to be resistant and reluctant. Can you relate to that? What do you think? How many of you can relate to like the resistance, you know? As a matter of fact, just so you know, when I was writing this book, the people who were my agent and the publisher, they're like, I don't think you should call the book Permission to Feel. We think you should call it something like Emotional Intelligence for Leaders. And I was like, I am not writing that book. And I wanted it to be something deeper, and like, well, there's going to be a lot of resistance. There's not going to be a lot of guys, you know, walking around the airport, looking around at that book called Permission to Feel and grabbing it. If it says how to be an emotionally intelligent leader, then they'll pick it up. I'm like, I understand that, but I'm trying to create an emotion revolution here. And if I deny myself the title of the book that I want to write, then I don't want to do it. Because I think that we are on this journey, or if we don't get there, it's just going to be superficial forever. We got enough of the superficial emotional intelligence work. Now it's time to go deeper. So with that said, Dawn, what I'm recommending you do is chapter 2. Not everybody relates to chapter 1. People will get nervous when they hear my story. As a matter of fact, a lot of guys come up to me after I give presentations and they say things like, you know, Mark, my goodness, like you're so vulnerable. You talk about your abuse, you talk about your bullying. And I'm like, yeah, it took me a long time to do that. But I am comfortable now. And they say things like, well, you know, Mark, I would never tell my son that I was bullied. And I said, well, what if your kid is being bullied right now? And somehow or another, your attitude about feelings is a message that says to your kid, stay away. I don't want to hear it. I say this to you because it is a big piece of this, right? The permission to feel. But not everybody can relate to that. You know, I'm a scientist. I work at a university that's, you know, top university. Not everybody wants to talk about their feelings, although they're going to start doing it more and more. But they want to see the data. And so next week, we're going to dive deeply into the data, Dawn, to talk about why emotions matter and why the science is right there with us. Like anybody who's a leader or of any kind of organization who says emotions have no place here should be fired. I'm just going to say it out loud because they have no clue about the power of emotions. For everyone's sake, for your health and wellness, to productivity, to creativity, to burnout, to job satisfaction, to everything. So we're going to get there next week, Dawn. Next question. If we give ourselves permission to feel, are we hoping that eventually we arrive at higher levels of happiness? In other words, we should sit with the way we're feeling, not try to fake it till we make it. But the end goal is to get more green and yellow because getting further up the pleasant axis is important to well-being. I think this is a really great question, Susie. And here's what I want to say. When you think about, and those of you, you know, she's talking about the mood meter, the yellow, the red, the blue, and the green. We're going to get into it. Don't you worry, everybody. You're going to know that mood meter so well by the time you leave this book club. You're going to get a tattoo of the mood meter. And I'll even pay for it if you do it. The goal is never to just be happy. And so we're going to talk about that a lot over the next couple of weeks, right? Maybe the goal is about wellness, right? The goal is about having a sense of purpose and meaning in life. And so I want to move away from, excuse me, the striving for happiness model, because I think that's a pathway to more stress, especially right now. So here's what I want to do for all of you. I have now granted you the permission to feel all emotions, and especially like the freaked out ones right now that everybody's having between COVID, systemic racism, and politics. Like we're just going to give ourselves the permission to have all feelings. They're not bad emotions. They're legit. What everybody's feeling right now is mostly legitimate. And so for Susie, I want us to think about emotions as which emotions best serve us to achieve what goals. I will say up front that yes, you want greater emotional balance. The way I want to think about the unpleasant feelings in that red and blue, which we'll go into more detail on, is that a lot of red and blue and like intense red and blue for long periods of time, it's a signal, right? I need help, I need support, I need better strategies. Red and blue that you're able to manage effectively is just fine. With that said, again, we do want to have some yellow and blue. Like I was a kid and a young adult who didn't have a lot of yellow and blue, or I should say yellow. And so like, I'm going to give myself some yellow. Why not? It's nice to be happy once in a while, excited and optimistic and feel good. Just can't expect to be there all the time. All right, next question. Is anxiety a manifestation of unexpressed emotions or emotions that have not been regulated? Are tools and techniques like meditation the best way to manage anxiety? My daughters are 3 and 10. I'd like to think we have a home where they have permission to feel the full range of emotions. I'm talking to my therapist. He says that we don't, that we do, and that's a good thing. But it's also important to provide boundaries over appropriate versus inappropriate behaviors. 100%. 100%, agree with your psychology therapist. But I do want to correct a little bit of the thinking around, is anxiety a manifestation of unexpressed emotions that have not been regulated? Anxiety is about uncertainty, unpredictability, and a lack of control. So we feel anxious, like many of us do a lot these days. Like teachers are telling us that, right? The unpredictability about whether kids are going to wear their masks if I'm in the classroom, unpredictability about protective wear, the unpredictability about the outcome of an election. That is what creates anxiety for people. And so anxiety is different than other emotions like fear and stress, and overwhelm and worry. I'm not going to give away everything today, but we are going to, one thing I'm going to promise you is that by the end of this webinar, not webinar today, by the end of this 7 weeks, you're going to be so emotionally granular that, you're going to have like every word in the English language dictionary at least, right? Not everyone, there's thousands, but hundreds, and be specific as opposed to that clumper. Next question. Are all our emotions caused by ourselves, or can others or events cause us to have an emotion? Okay, thanks, Beth, for that question. So next week, we're going to define what the difference is between an emotion and a mood and a feeling. I'll just give you a little heads up. We create our emotions. Nobody and no event causes us to feel something. So that one you're going to have to sit with. We create our emotions. No one or no event causes you to feel something. And we're going to really explore that principle in a lot of detail next week. Okay. This is from Cindy. As the founder of a not-for-profit that focuses on finding tools to combat the mental crisis our kids are facing, I'm often met with this comment. Kids today just aren't as tough as our generation. They need to suck it up. Chapter 1 addresses this, but I'm not sure what the best elevator pitch is for silencing this all too often response to my mission. Any advice? Oh, Cindy, you have no idea. That's a trigger for me. And I just said that somebody or something can't trigger you, and I feel like I just lied because I'm triggered by that. And not by you, of course, but by that belief system. Here's what's important to know. If our kids are the way they are, we created them. Can we just acknowledge that? If our kids are the way they are, we created them. And does that mean we just say, you know what, they're all messed up, we're just gonna like good luck, goodbye? Let's think about it. So my answer to that question is that whoever's asking you that question, let them know it's a really bad question because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is what we do now to support people in having greater emotional balance and having strategies to support them and having healthy relationships and maybe even having their dreams come true. So that's my answer. It's a short and sweet one. We're going to go into a lot of detail about what we call mindsets around emotion. You'll learn more in chapter 3 about that. But let me tell you, I can meet people, everywhere I go, I meet people who are the, I'm going to call that the emotion revolution saboteurs. But it's all right. We're going to work with them too. Let me ask all of you to take a nice long inhale, please. And a nice long exhale. Let's bring ourselves back into the room. Here's what I want to know from you. What are your hopes for this book club? Why are you here? Really, just be honest with me. Be honest with everybody. It's good. There's no judgment here. What would you like to get out of this 7 weeks together? What are you hoping for? Why are you giving me an hour, or I should say 45 minutes on a Thursday night? So I need you to really go there for us tonight, because we're gonna look at this and we're gonna create buckets from it. And we're gonna make sure that we go there. Because the only way this is gonna be helpful is if it's useful for you. And hopefully I'll grow too. So just take another few seconds and enter that in. Another few seconds. Thank you for sharing all your ideas. This is great. But you're gonna make me work a lot harder than I anticipated for this book club. But as I say, you gotta be careful what you ask. So, may I ask all of you to get good posture in your seats as we wrap up our time together. Take a nice long inhale, please, everyone. And a nice long exhale. Today's session was really just getting to know each other a little bit. It was focused on permission to feel, right? I told you about the title. We talked about what it means to have the permission to feel. What are the characteristics? And the words that you all shared with me were words like compassionate, empathic, non-judgmental, supportive, validating, unconditional love. So here's my request to all of you. 1, starting today, can you give yourself greater self-compassion? Can you be empathic to yourself and others? Try to be non-judgmental about your own and other people's emotions. Be emotionally supportive to yourself. You can give yourself hugs. Be emotionally supportive to the people that you're surrounded by or with. Validate all the emotions. And I think the last one that says here is just unconditional love for yourself and for everyone. And on that note, I just want to thank you so much for joining our book club. If you have people that that you might want to invite, please do so. And look forward to seeing you next week. And we're going to send you that survey because I really feel excited about all of you having data to support you in this process. So on that note, I've given you the permission to feel. Now you got to go give it to other people. And on that note, see you next week. Bye, everybody. Thank you.